myself. The Lord is my portion. Therefore, I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him, to the one who seeks him. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for man to bear the yoke while he is young. Psalms 42:11. Why are you downcast, O my soul? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Savior and my God. Shall we pray? Lord, the God of righteousness and truth, grant to our Governor General, Dame Marguerite Pindling and her government, to members of Parliament, to all in possession of responsibility, the guidance of your Spirit. May they never lead the nation wrongly through love of power, desire to please, or unworthy ideals, but laying aside all private interest and prejudices, keep in mind their responsibility to seek to improve the condition of all Bahamians. So may your kingdom come and your name be hallowed. In Jesus' name. Honorable members, praying the prayer Jesus taught his disciples, pray saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses. We forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Renwood Wells, Jeffrey Lloyd, Dr. Dwayne Sands, Marvin Dane, Frankie Campbell, Dionisio D'Aguilar, Michael Pintard, Darren Hensfield, Romuald Barrera, Denisha Roll, Renzo Roll, Ellsworth Johnson, Philip Davis, Juan Miller, Patricia Parker Edstrom, Ira Lewis, Carlton Boland, James Aubrey, Travis Robinson, Adrian Dixon, Ronald Saunders, Frederick McAlpine, Hank Johnson, Mark Hume, Michael Coates, Miriam Becky Emmanuel, Reese Chipman, Ruben Rami, Ricky Mackey, Shannon Dawn Cartwright, Sean L. Ferguson, Renatana Martin, Heiko Fox, Chester Cooper.
Good morning, honorable members. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Lying of documents by ministers. Statements and communications by ministers. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
None, Mr. Speaker.
Communications by the clerk.
None, Mr. Speaker.
Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writs. Presentation of petitions. Presentation of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. Second reading. Thank you. Second reading and committal of bills. Committee of the whole House. Third reading and passing of bills. Consideration of Senate amendments. Resolutions. chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to move the following resolution. Whereas by Section 18 of the Financial Administration Audit Act 2010, it is provided that no loans shall be raised by the government and no guarantee involving a financial liability shall be binding under the government unless entered into with the prior approval of the House of Assembly, signified by resolution thereof. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this House authorizes the government of the Bahamas to guarantee the loan to Lucaya Renewal Holdings Limited in the said sum of $35 million for the purpose of paying the balance of the purchase price of the properties pursuant to the SPA. 2, authorizes the Treasurer on behalf of the government of the Bahamas to execute the guarantee attached thereto at Annex 2.
Just a moment, honorable member. Can we have some more volume on the honorable member's mic? Point of order. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Mr. Speaker, I just wish to invite the Minister of Finance and the governor to consider whether this Parliament could do what they're asking them to do, and that is to approve this resolution for a guarantee to an entity that does not fall within the identified entities in Section 17 of the Financial Administration Act. I'm sure that counsel for Hutchison Whampoa, and I trust the Attorney General will also be listening about it. And I remind those who were in the previous administration on their concerns about the issue of our acquisition of the 4 aircrafts, and they wondered why we did not come to Parliament, because it was because of the fact that it was a vendor's purchaser loan, and so another process was crafted to assist in getting the loan. Now, what I'm saying, and if you could follow me, please, and I asked the question, I raise it for your consideration. Section 18, if you follow me, says subject to Section 17. So Section 18 is controlled by Section 17. Subject to Section 17 and to the provisions of the Public Treasury Bills Act, no loan shall be raised by the government and no guarantee involving a financial liability shall be binding upon the government unless entered into with the prior approval. The prior approval is something we'll talk about later on. That's subject to debate, but I'm just concerned about the more fundamental issue here. Signified by resolution of the House of Assembly. So when we go to Section 17, Section 17 identifies the entities to which government could give guarantees. All right? That this says, and those entities are from any bank, insurance company, or money lending institution. Hutchison, the purchasers here, the vendors here, and do not fall into any of those categories. And yes, there's a rider. It speaks about 15% of the average ordinary revenues. But then again, we're talking about a sum less than that.
What's the question?
The question is whether or not that we are able to signify by resolution an advance, a borrowing from the government from an institution that does not fall into the category of those named in Section 17, the controlling provision. And I'm sure counsel who represent Hutchison Whampoa will see this. I raised the matter for your consideration.
Whether you can borrow from institutions.
No, not whether you could borrow. Yeah. Government could borrow from any institution.
From other institutions.
No, I'd be talking about the resolution to guarantee whether we are capable of doing that, have regard to what is stated in the Act. Because the Act says we are bound only to pass resolutions for borrowings from the specified institutions. I'm not saying the government can't borrow and who they can borrow from. But when you come to Parliament, to have a signified resolution, we are confined to certain institutions, bank, insurance company, or money lending institution. Now, again, we just asked you whether you've looked into that. You know, this was a matter that came up in our previous, when we bought this was raised by no less a person than Peter to Inquest. East Grand Bahama, when we bought the aircraft. No, I'm not saying he's a lawyer. No, he was asking us why we didn't come to Parliament with a resolution. Yeah, but we said because it was not proper. No, sorry.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Carmichael.
If I may have the opportunity to respond to someone who's very senior to me and who I respect in another profession. It raised the question with respect to Section 17. Raised two questions with respect to Section 17. First of all, Section 17 deals with a very, very specific circumstance. It deals where the government is borrowing for the purpose of meeting the current requirements of the consolidated fund. That's not the situation. Section 17 has no application to that. But that is not the situation. It has to be the government is utilizing for a specific purpose. This section is limited to that circumstance. We don't have that challenge here in the Bahamas where we have to borrow to meet current requirements of the consolidated fund. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, this is a permissive section. And you see the word use may. May for the purpose, I may borrow, may for the purpose borrow from any bank, etc. They're not limited to
Honourable member, you may proceed. You may proceed.
that didn't happen Mr. Speaker, this section also uses permissive may.
Just a moment, Honourable member.
So, Mr. Speaker,
Thank you, Honorable Member.
the section uses the permissive may, and it creates what lawyers refer to as a genus. It is interpreted what you would refer to as usdem generis. And so you have may advances from a bank, from an insurance company, any money lending institution. And so it creates a situation where this is interpreted very, very generously, very wide. So while I respect what the Honorable Member for Cat Island said, there are points that he can raise in debate if he wishes to, but they certainly don't impact the legality of what we seek to do here this morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
I raised the matter. I've drawn attention to the provisions. It's open. He has prayed in AIDS. Carmichael, sorry. No, you have to use, I see hands. I did. Carmichael. Yeah, Carmichael. Carmichael has ably put an attractive interpretation to the provisions. Yeah, attractive. Yeah. The merit of it will be rather counsels who have been listening to him for the purchase of vendors will adopt it. Because at the end of the day, it is their risk, not ours. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I start, I'd just like to recognize members of the Union in Grand Bahama, both the line and managerial staff who has traveled this long distance and stayed overnight for this very important debate, as this affects them intimately. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this resolution, a necessary and critical step in the rescue and renewal of Grand Bahama. The redevelopment of Grand Bahama is essential for the ongoing economic recovery and development of the economy of the Bahamas. I note at the outset that the Grand Lucayan property includes 3 distinct properties. The property referred to as Memories, the Lighthouse Point, and Breakers Key. And to clarify any misunderstanding, that may be in the public domain, the Lighthouse Point property is currently open. Mr. Speaker, I often speak of the common good. And the common good means acting in the interest of all Bahamians, not just the interest of residents of New Providence. We must be equally committed to the needs of our family islands and the needs of Grand Bahamians who are an integral part of our Commonwealth. I note, Mr. Speaker, the sentiment of Michelle Dorset of the Commonwealth Union of Hotel Services and Allied Workers Union, who represents the line staff at the Grand Lucayan, who said of the government's stance on the Grand Lucayan, and I quote, "We have to pull together. We cannot be divided." She went on to say, Mr. Speaker, We have suffered for too long, and I thank the government from the bottom of my heart for what they have done. End quote. Under no circumstances, Mr. Speaker, could this FNM government, in good conscience, allow Freeport or Grand Bahama to sink economically. Let me make this point clear. The effects of the full closure of Grand Lucaya would be catastrophic, with a severe effect on the Port Lucaya Marketplace and Marina, and over 50 businesses located in Port Lucaya. Millions of dollars would be lost from the economy of Freeport and Grand Bahama with the full closure of the Grand Lucayan property. This would include economic displacement and loss for taxi drivers, straw vendors, restaurant owners, and the many ancillary businesses that rely on this hotel. Let me acknowledge at this point, Mr. Speaker, the employees of the Grand Lucayan who have endured during some of the most difficult times. I commend also many small businesses in Freeport and at Lucaya and the surrounding areas who have endured with hard work and courage and determination. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this government...
Just a moment. Honorable members, we'll take a 5-minute suspension and return. The business of this House stands suspended for 5 minutes. Honorable members, just before we begin, I wish to request of you, each of you, that in all of your zeal and enthusiasm during the presentations, that you would not bang on the table. Apparently there's an issue with one of the cables, and so you can applaud, use your hands this time. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Mr. Speaker, as I rise, I can applaud myself. Mr. Speaker, I want to start all over, start that clock. Back to zero for me, please.
Back his time.
I don't want to lose a second.
Leave granted to begin afresh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this resolution, a necessary and critical step to the rescue and renewal of Grand Bahama. The development of Grand Bahama is essential for the ongoing economic recovery and development of the economy of the Bahamas. I note at the outset, Mr. Speaker, that the Grand Lucayan property includes 3 distinct hotel properties. The property referred to as Memories, Lighthouse Point, and Breakers Key. And to clarify any misunderstanding there may be in the public domain at this time, the Lighthouse Point, that property, Mr. Speaker, is currently open. Mr. Speaker, I often speak of the common good. And the common good means acting in the interests of all Bahamians, not just the interests of residents of New Providence, but all Bahamians. And we must be equally committed to the needs of our family islands and the needs of Grand Bahamians, who are an integral part of our Commonwealth. I note, Mr. Speaker, the sentiment of Michelle Dossett of the Commonwealth Union of Hotel Services and Allied Workers Union, who represents the line staff at the Grand Lucayan, who said at the government stands on the Grand Lucayan, and she said these words, Mr. Speaker, in the most emotional and passionate manner. And I quote, "We have to pull together. We cannot be divided." She went on to say passionately, "We have suffered for too long, and I thank the government from the bottom of my heart for what they have done." That's a sentiment not only of Dorset, Mr. Speaker, but it's a sentiment of most Grand Bahamians. Under no circumstances could this FNM government, in good conscience, allow Freeport or Grand Bahama to sink economically. And let me make this point clear. The effects of the full closure of Grand Lucayan would be catastrophic, with a severe effect on Port Lucaya Marketplace and Marina, and over 50 businesses located in Port Lucaya. Millions of dollars would be lost from the economy of Freeport and Grand Bahama with the full closure of the Grand Lucayan property. And this would include economic displacement and loss for taxi drivers, straw vendors, restaurant owners, and the many ancillary businesses that rely on the hotel. Let me acknowledge at this point, Mr. Speaker, the employees of the Grand Lucayan who have endured during some very difficult times. I commend also the many small businesses in Freeport and at Port Lucaya and the surrounding areas who have endured with hard work and courage and, most of all, determination. The government, Mr. Speaker, is acting to secure these employees and these small business owners the future of their children and the future of Freeport and Grand Bahama. I say to all those employees, businesses, taxi drivers, straw vendors, and to the entire island of Grand Bahama, a new day is truly beginning in Grand Bahama. I note that with the purchase of the Grand Lucayan, that the government has provided for the continuation of the union agreement and current employee contracts to ensure that the employees are fully protected. While the government did not have to do this, it was the right thing. It was the right thing to do. Mr. Speaker, Here is how the payments are structured. The government of Bahamas financed the initial $30 million of the purchase price for the Grand Lucayan properties by an advance from the contingency fund authorized by the Minister of Finance pursuant to Article 133 of the Constitution of the Bahamas. You got that, right? Hold on. Today's resolution, you have your time. Today's resolution, my lawyer can be all over you, authorizes the government of the Bahamas to guarantee the loan to Lucaya Renewal Holdings Limited in the said sum of $35 million for the purpose of paying the balance of the purchase price of the properties pursuant to the sales purchase agreement. The assets, Mr. Speaker, of the Grand Lucayan that are being purchased include approximately 1,270 hotel rooms and suites, several restaurants and lounges, several meeting rooms, pools, one golf course, a casino, and a spa. Mr. Speaker, many have asked, why did the government make this decision? We were faced with certain options with the full closure of the Grand Lucayan. We could let the Lighthouse Point, the last remaining open section of the hotel, to close. This would lead to the economic collapse of much of Freeport, with even higher unemployment, greater despair, and a loss of hope for many Grand Bahamians for many, many more years. In essence, Mr. Speaker, we could sit idly by and watch the Grand Lucayan sink into a state of disrepair, becoming a ghost town, like the once vibrant but now dying International Bazaar, which is a shell of its former self. The Royal Oasis has been closed for several years. At that time, no government intervened to save the hotel from closing or to act to reopen that hotel. The people of Grand Bahama know too well what damage inaction can do. On the other hand, we could have entered into an untenable agreement with a private entity, seeking endless concessions which would not serve our national interests. And we have been down that road before. Mr. Speaker, in the operation of the Grand Lucayan under the last PLP government, the PLP granted combined subsidies to Hutchinson and Sunwing, which would have totaled approximately $21 million annually for a period of at least 7 years. This would have amounted to the payment of over $147 million. In 2013, the PLP agreed to pay Sunwing subsidy for electricity, consumables imported, freight charges, insurance. And I asked the question, did the PLP ever table those documents?
No.
The PLP was content to pay out these subsidies with no equity in the Grand Lucayan, and with little or no prospect for the rebranding and redevelopment of the property. To continue such a massive subsidy would have been a mistake. It was because of Hurricane Matthew that this arrangement ended. I find it amazing, Mr. Speaker, I find it extremely amazing that the leader of the opposition, whose party arranged this deal when they were last in government, is now offering financial and other advice about the future of the Grand Lucayan. You couldn't be serious. You could not be serious.
This is funny. This is the Graham Davis administration.
The PLP, Mr. Speaker, has no plan. No plan for the Grand Lucayan and Grand Bahama. They had no plan for the Grand Lucayan and Grand Bahama during their last time in office. They still have no plan, no ideas, and no vision. What they say is plenty talk. Talkers they are, doers they are not. I also note that Hurricane Matthew hit Grand Bahama in October 2016. The hotels were closed and the PLP were unable to convince Hutchinson to renovate or reopen Baker's Key or Memories. Mr. Speaker, life, like government, is about making difficult decisions, especially when faced with tough and complex choices. As a medical doctor, I have often had to advise strong measures and to make decisive and tough decisions to save a patient and to restore life. We all have to make tough decisions in life in order to achieve a more important or greater goal. When we learned of the intention of Hutchinson to completely close the Grand Lucayan, which was shortly after we came to office, we first sought to have a private group purchase the property. But this fell through for reasons I will outline further. To ensure the economic survival of many of our fellow citizens in Grand Bahama, we had to make difficult yet necessary decisions. The Cabinet of the Bahamas decided that the government should take temporary ownership of the Grand Lucayan with the commitment to resell the property as quickly as possible. In my heart and soul, Mr. Speaker, in my heart and soul, I believe it is the right thing to do. I say again, Mr. Speaker, I am convinced it is the right thing to do. During the Great Recession of 2008, the United States was faced with the collapse of the auto industry. To save the industry and to save Detroit, Michigan, and other areas which produced cars, then President George W. Bush, a Republican, initiated a large-scale auto bailout. This temporarily placed ownership of a number of car manufacturers in the hands of the federal government. The bailout was mostly overseen by President Barack Obama, a Democrat. Sometimes we'll have that degree of maturity. His decision was very unpopular at that time.
Very unpopular.
And he was severely criticized. He was called everything except a child of God. And I understand that. The auto bailout by the U.S. federal government, Mr. Speaker, cost $80 billion, funds that were eventually repaid. The auto industry roared back, and the U.S. government relinquished its temporary ownership. After the recovery of the auto industry, Mr. Speaker, President Obama said, and I quote, "It was the right thing to do." President Obama said of his decision, "We could have done nothing," which some people said we should do, and let those companies fail. But think about what that would have meant for this country, the suppliers, the distributors, the communities that depend on the workers who patronize the restaurants and shops at the stores. All those companies would have gone under also. End quote. Mr. Speaker, I firmly believe that our government is doing the right thing. Both ethically and economically. I understand the concern and the reluctance of quite a number of Bahamians about the government purchasing the Grand Lucaya. Some remember the decision by a former PLP government to purchase a number of hotels on Cable Beach some decades ago. The hotels became a major drain on the public treasury. You remember? There was tremendous nepotism and cronyism and bloated contracts and political interference in the management and running of those hotels. But Mr. Speaker, because of our commitment to private ownership, it was the FNM which privatized those hotels. And indeed, the FNM has a greater commitment to private enterprise and ownership than the PLP. The PLP has a record of maintaining state ownership of entities which should be privatized. They like state control so that they can cook up more deals for themselves. And the PLP like to raid government corporations. There is a distinct difference between the FNM and the PLP. A distinct difference when it comes to securing the interests of the Bahamian people. We are securing the Grand Lucaya for the people of Freeport and the Bahamas. In ordinary times, the FNM would not propose government ownership of an entity such as Grand Lucaya. But these, Mr. Speaker, these are not ordinary times. We are faced with an emergency in Freeport and Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, my administration made a deliberate decision to establish a special purpose vehicle to acquire all of the assets of the Grand Lucayan. The name of the SPV, Special Purpose Vehicle, is Lucayan Renewal Holding Limited, a name that signals our intention to aggressively promote the renewal of Grand Bahama, inclusive of the Grand Lucayan and Port Lucayan. The special purpose vehicle, Lucayan Renewal Holdings Limited, is established explicitly to own the assets outside of the Hotel Corporation of the Bahamas. And this is, Mr. Speaker, a demonstration of the government's view that this acquisition represents a special case. It is not a return to the old way of hotel ownership. Let me emphasize, Mr. Speaker, that it is not the philosophy nor the inclination of the Free National Movement for the government to own entities such as hotels and other enterprises, which should ideally remain in private hands. The special purpose vehicle is also a demonstration of the government's determination to sell the Grand Lucayan property as rapidly as possible to an entity, including possibly a Bahamian entity. With the demonstrated capacity to make it a commercial success. Mr. Speaker, I think when we speak of a Bahamian entity, I would like members here and Bahamas at large to Google the whole process of Butch Stewart, his rise to what he has today. Why should we not have our own Butch Stewart? His net worth is now $1 billion. That's what we should be doing, Mr. Speaker, encouraging Bahamians. And that would be our first choice, to sell to Bahamians. The SPV, the Lucayan Renewal Holdings Limited, has a Bahamian board which took responsibility for the resort last week. I thank the board for their work thus far and their willingness to serve their fellow Bahamians and the good people of Grand Bahama. The board comprises of the following individuals, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Michael Scott, a noted commercial attorney who heads the Hotel Corporation. Mr. Terrence Gape, a noted property attorney in Grand Bahama who has extensive experience in investments in Grand Bahama. Willie Moss, another experienced attorney and former vice president of the Grand Bahama Port Authority who lives in Grand Bahama. Linda Turnquest, a qualified accountant, chief financial officer, second in charge and highest ranking Bahamian at the Grand Bahama Shipyard, the largest cruise ship care facility in the world. Ed Reming, an experienced forensic accountant and insolvency practitioner who also worked on the Bahama matter. Russell Miller, who has had many years in the hotel industry, both in Freeport, New Providence, and abroad. Carrie Leonard, another experienced commercial attorney who lives in Freeport and formerly at the Grand Bahama, Port Authority. The board has the obligation of ensuring that the lighthouse point remains open, securing the employment of the workers at that hotel. The board is also responsible, Mr. Speaker, for an interim plan of action for the Grand Lucayan property, including various refurbishments and how various properties may be utilized in the upcoming busy winter season, which promises to be another banner year for tourism.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the work of the board is critical to the repositioning of the 1,271-room Grand Lucayan Resort and Casino and the Port Lucayan Marketplace area. Port Lucaya is a microeconomic center for tourism on Grand Bahama, which has potential for growth. The board of Lucayan Renewal Holdings Limited is also committed to an exit strategy to sell the Grand Lucayan properties to a private entity. This exit strategy, Mr. Speaker, includes the identification and selection of a qualified buyer within a short as possible time frame. And this potential buyer should be able to help create a unique destination with the accompanying airlift and marketing that will help to make the property and the destination successful. Let me emphasize, Mr. Speaker, that we are not simply trying to recruit an investor to whom we can just quickly sell the property. We are seeking investors who will help to ensure that the Grand Lucayan is part of a springboard which will also help to catalyze the redevelopment the Port Lucayan area. Let me note the following of the sale and selection process of a potential buyer. The board will ensure that the principles behind each expression of interest will be carefully vetted by international agencies for proof of financial ability or proof of funding, proof of fit and proper character, with a reputation for executing international resort brands with knowledge and experience in marketing. The board, Mr. Speaker, they have already commenced reviewing expressions of interest from several organizations previously received by the Office of the Prime Minister and has scheduled other courtesy meetings as necessary. There are a number of entities that have expressed serious interest in purchasing the Grand Lucayan property. And indeed, discussions have begun with a number of individuals for the sale of the said property. The board recognizes that its responsibility is to do more than ensure a swift sale of the Grand Lucayan. The board recognizes, Mr. Speaker, that it has the responsibility to identify a well-funded group with a vision to create a sustainable 2016. Grand Bahama was severely affected by Hurricane Matthew. All three properties closed after the hurricane. In November 2016, only the Lighthouse Point reopened and remains the only property of the three that is open. The owner of the Grand Lucayan decided not to renovate and to reopen Memories and Breakers Key, which remained closed too long years later. After the devastation of Hurricane Matthew, the people of Freeport and Grand Bahama experienced the devastation of these properties being shattered. This was devastation upon devastation. It is estimated that because of the closure of Memories, hotel rooms available on Grand Bahama fell by 57%, and hotel nights sold fell by 59%. The Grand Bahama Tourist Board also reported that as a result of the closure of 2/3 of the resort, total hotel rooms available and rooms revenue on the island decreased by approximately 60%. Mr. Speaker, the public should be aware of the facts which led to this decision. Hutchison made it clear after Hurricane Matthew that they wished to sell the hotel property. They refused to invest further funds to reopen the remaining properties. In April 2017, Canadian developer Paul Wynn of Wynn Development Limited entered into a letter of intent with the present owner Hutchison at a purchase price that was substantially more than $65 million. You know how much it is. If the press asks me, I can tell them. The PLP were well aware of the purchase price being substantially more than $65 million. You know. At that time, Wynn Development requested the following. Wynn Development requested the following obligations on the government to complete the transaction. Mr. PLP. 1, $2 million paid by the government to Wynn 60 days after closing. 2, $8 million per year paid by the government to Wynn for the first 3 years for property subsidy. 3,
Not an operating subsidy now.
$7.2 million per year for the subsequent 2 years for property subsidy.
That's 14 million.
4, $1.5 million per year for 5 years casino subsidy. 5, airlift subsidy of $7 million for 3 years.
21.
And that the government agreed to a most favored nation status.
That's your 65 million right there.
While the PLP announced a letter of intent during the 2017 general election campaign, they were not able to move past this letter of intent prior to the election. They were also, Mr. Speaker, unable to secure confirmation on the operations of the hotels. Mr. Speaker, after coming to office, my government was confronted with the reality that if the sale of the hotel was not completed, Hutchison would close the resort. In fact, my government was confronted with this reality and intervened to prevent this occurrence on several occasions. We were committed to ensuring that we preserved the jobs of the existing employees and all those jobs and businesses which would be in jeopardy should the resort completely closed. Contrary to what has been said by some, and they know of whom I speak, my government immediately began to communicate with Paul Wynn and his representatives, evidenced by the communications from as early as 22nd of May 2017. We also began discussions with the Sunwing representatives, and they had the agreement to operate the Memories Resort. After several months of negotiations with Paul Wynn and Sunwing, it was proposed in August 2017 that in order for the Wynn development to complete the deal with Sunwing as operator, the government should agree to pay the following. 1. Wynn Group landlord support of $8.5 million. 2. Sunwing Group 744 room subsidy and Canadian airlift to the tune of $9 million. 3. AM Wynn Group subsidy of $1.43 million. 4. USA Airlift program operated by Sunwing Group, $4 million. This amounted, Mr. Speaker, to $22.93 million per year for the first 5 years and $9 million for the next 5 years. If the government, listen carefully, lift your head, opposition leader. If the government agreed, we would be paying a total of $159.65 million.
Christie Davis deal. We should give support to that concession.
And all this, Mr. Speaker, all this without the government having any ownership in the hotel.
No ownership. Nothing.
This was not acceptable to the government.
We don't go like that.
This would have been a repeat of the agreement the PLP signed up to. Mr. Speaker, for many years the government have been providing subsidies and concessions for the Grand Lucayan. And Mr. Speaker, the government decided that these subsidies requests were not acceptable, and in late 2017 began discussions with Hutchison directly to purchase the hotel. I informed the public that the government made an offer to purchase the resort. In fact, we were successful, listen to this part, opposition leader, Cat Island, you must hear this. We were successful in our negotiations in bringing the purchase price down significantly. You knew from whence it came. You know. However, before the government signed a letter of intent with Hutchison, Paul Wynn re-emerged and requested that the government partner with him in the purchase at a reduced price, with equity interest being granted to the government and a reduced amount of government subsidy payments. After further negotiations, aided by the government, Paul Wynn executed another letter of intent with Hutchison, dated in January 2018, this time with a purchase price of $65 million. My government immediately continued discussion with Paul Wynn on a heads of agreement, which would include the purchase, development, and renovation and tourism plan for Grand Bahama. And over the next few months, the government continued detailed and complex negotiations on airlift, the government's equity interests, development plan, renovations cost, work permit, and other items. In June 2018, our administration and Sunwing drafted a tourism support document. The government could not agree to the added terms added by Sunwing. In July 2018, We continued negotiations with Paul Wynn and another operator. We again arrived at a point where we had a draft heads of agreement. However, after we gave Mr. Wynn an absolute deadline to complete, he presented us with changes to the heads of agreement. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want all Bahamas to listen to these changes. And they tell me whether we were wrong or would they have agreed to the additional changes that was requested. These changes, Mr. Speaker, are as follows. The government must pay its 15% share up front instead of over time as previously agreed. 2, the government agreed to ensure Paul Wynn is provided with electricity at a reduced 20% discount rate. The government must pay 20% of the electricity rate of the hotel for an investor when many Bahamians' electricity is off. 3, Mr. Speaker, Paul Wynn would be permitted to employ 420 non-Bahamians for work on the project.
Never.
What would that do to Grand Bahama? 420 non-Bahamians for work on the project. Paul Wynn would have the ability to have 15% pre-approved non-Bahamian employment without the need to apply for work permits. These are the requests. These are the requests of us, Mr. Speaker. In addition to that, Paul Wynn would not be liable to pay any increase in taxes. If by chance, God forbid, and it's not going to happen, so I don't want the press say minutes say taxes will increase. Get it right. If by chance there was an increase in taxes, Paul Wynn pays the old tax and the government absorbs what difference there are. Mr. Speaker, the other request by Paul Wynn of the government of the Bahamas was an annual marketing subsidy of $750,000. Other request was no casino taxes. Another request, Mr. Speaker, was that the government must commit to purchasing the Grand Bahama, the Freeport International Airport, or build a new one within 2 years. And this is the part I want the Bahamians to hear. I want them to, I'm going to put this in basic language. The government should pay for any losses that Paul Wynn, the hotel, incurs. In other words, and in addition to that, guarantee him 7% return. In other words, Mr. Speaker, what he had requested of us was if he lost $5 million, we must pay him $5 million. Plus 7% of the $5 million plus the other millions that he made. Now,
Point of order.
I asked, Mr. Speaker, I asked the Bahamian people, if an investor came to you and said to you, the government said to you, an investor came and said, you must pay 20% of my electricity bill. You must allow me, remember the hotel only has 400 workers, you must allow me 420 work permits. You must also guarantee me that I will have no losses. You will absorb that loss. In addition, you must give me 7% return. And they also come and inform you that you must assist with marketing. If taxes were to change, God forbid, let's say VAT just moved from 7.5 to 12, they must remain at 7.5, and you and I, we must pay 12, but not them. We must pay the additional 4.5 for them. And if, God forbid, like in the UK and other Caribbean countries, where VAT is 20%, now get this right, press, I'm not saying the Bahamas VAT going up, get it right. But if, God forbid, VAT moved to 12%, they must remain at 7.5, and as poor Bahamians must absorb that extra cost for them. Now I ask them, were we wrong in telling him, I don't want to say where I told them to go and how deep. I don't want to say that. But the government made it clear. The government made it clear, Mr. Speaker, that the requested concessions could not be agreed. Just to reiterate, the escalated requests for concessions included an excessive number of work permits for both the construction and operating phases of the property, and requests for guaranteed returns on funds invested, and requests for guaranteed coverage of any loss. Now, when the total financial value, Mr. Speaker, I want the opposition leader to listen to this. When the total financial value of the concessions being requested for the initial 10-year period exceed the acquisition price plus the estimated cost to renovate the property, the government's decision on how to proceed on the Grand Lucaya became clear.
Crystal.
Let me offer a general note here. Transparency is essential for good governance. Still, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the cries for information to be made public during negotiations, there is a need for confidentiality. This is the case whether one is discussing matters of foreign policy with foreign governments or negotiating with prospective investors, whether domestic or foreign. Mr. Speaker, this decision to purchase the Grand Lucayan is in the greater national interest. Restoring and reopening the properties at the Grand Lucayan is vital to the economy of Grand Bahama. You have no interest in Grand Bahama.
And who's doing it?
The restoration. The restoration and reopening. The restoration and reopening is critical for the wider economy of the Bahamas. As a country, Mr. Speaker, we are still recovering from the Great Recession of 2008. Economic growth has returned, but this growth must be sustained. And to sustain this growth, we must revitalize Grand Bahama, an island you have no interest in. To revitalize Grand Bahama, Mr. Speaker, we must ensure that the Grand Lucayan is revitalized. After all, we are one Bahamas.
One Bahamas.
As a country, as a people, as a government, we must act to save Grand Bahama, our second most populated island with tens of thousands of Bahamians. They are your brothers and sisters, whether you want to believe it or not. I hate to believe that's how you treat your family. In revitalizing Grand Bahama, we are providing hope for our fellow Bahamians who are in great need and who have suffered for decades. As a government, we know that the time to talk is over. Today, Mr. Speaker, it is the time to act. The residents of New Providence are fortunate to have a number of major hotels and resorts operating successfully, including the Atlantis and Bahama resorts, which are taking advantage of a vibrant U.S. and global economy. We have the opportunity to take advantage of robust economies around the world, including the United States, much of Europe, China, and much of Asia. Our mission is about more than saving a resort. Our mission is about saving and repositioning Grand Bahama. Today is about more than saving 400 jobs. Our greater mission is to create 1,200 direct jobs and hundreds of indirect jobs. Today is about creating opportunities for entrepreneurs, taxi drivers, restaurant owners, and straw vendors. A new beginning for Grand Lucayan will be the catalyst for tourism and economic growth for Grand Bahama. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Tourism has developed a comprehensive plan for Grand Bahama to be a new destination unique from other islands. The umbrella effect of our destination's robust marketing thrust will prove to be far-reaching in its impact. Over a relatively short period of time, our efforts will be felt in all islands of our archipelago, especially Grand Bahama. Grand Bahama stands as the gateway to North America, from where we derive the largest share of our visitors. I wish to underscore some of the efforts that are being undertaken to build the Freeport Grand Bahama Island destination. Grand Bahama possesses so many assets which set this island apart as a unique tourist destination. Situated just a skip and a hop from the United States, Grand Bahama is an island of diversity. It offers the experience of a cosmopolitan resort vacation in Freeport, Lucaya, coupled with the unique cultural experience in the Family Island atmosphere of West End and East End. A diverse landscape of outbreak forests, mangroves, extensive caves, and miles of secluded beach make Grand Bahama an eco-tourism paradise. Given its pristine landscapes, natural wonders, and surrounding seas, the island of Grand Bahama is ripe for investment in ecotourism product offerings. It is also ripe for diving, fishing, and birding. Grand Bahama is already well known for its signature sporting and cultural events, which attract the international following. The Ministry of Tourism will continue to work with stakeholders to enhance these events to make them even more attractive. In an effort to diversify Grand Bahama's economy, the government has identified the island as a tech hub and innovation center. Travel agents are also kept abreast of the Grand Bahama product. Freeport webinars are staged regularly to update travel agents on the product and how to get to the island. There's ongoing outreach to co-branded media opportunities. Recently, the U.S. TV program Shark Tank, Shark Week, and Bonnier fishing editors were brought to Freeport. Their visit to Freeport resulted in substantial television coverage and print media, showcasing the diverse marine life of Grand Bahama. The Ministry of Tourism will promote Grand Lucayan Resort via owned assets like Bahamas.com and its PR channels. The ministry's sales team will assist with the introduction of the property to key tour operators and travel agent partners in all BTO markets. Tourism will also assist with securing an agency to make Grand Lucayan international. There has been much discussion about appropriate level of airlift to Grand Bahama. The evidence has shown that the level of destination desire in the international tourism market is such that, coupled with the appropriate marketing strategy, would drive demand for a Grand Bahama vacation. A number of airline partners have indicated their willingness to work with the Bahamas in bringing additional air seats to the destination once hotel rooms are open and demands pick up. The flow of visitors to Grand Bahama is further augmented by non-stop scheduled charter flights from Milan, Italy. Bahamas Air will also play a vital role in providing additional airlift to Grand Bahama from the U.S. by providing Grand Lucayan packages to attract more visitors to the resort. Mr. Speaker, the side opposite has made plenty of noise during the negotiations about the future of the Grand Lucayan. They are good, excellent, great, outstanding at talking. They are poor, disastrous, and terrible at action. Talkers they are, Mr. Speaker. They will not change. Doers they are not. An examination of the PLP record in Grand Bahama reveals their hypocrisy and their lack of vision and a lack of compassion. The Royal Oasis in Grand Bahama closed its doors sometimes in 2004. It remains closed today. The International Bazaar, which adjoins the hotel, is now a ghost town and is largely in disrepair. I got 2 minutes? All right. The PLP government at that time failed to act and did not intervene to save the resort from closing. We have learned the lessons from previous governments about the damage that may be caused by inaction. I note that while the PLP may whine and complain and talk out of both sides of their mouths in this debate, they are likely to support the resolution. If they really are against what we are doing to help in the rescue and recovery of Grand Bahama, they should be upfront with the people of Grand Bahama. The PLP, Mr. Leader of the Opposition, stop pretending. Either they are with the people of Grand Bahama and the Bahamas, or they are not.
Simple question.
Mr. Speaker, what are we doing? What we are doing is not about saving the status quo. What we are doing today is providing opportunity and hope for Grand Bahama and the Bahamas. The previous owners of the Grand Lucaya were not prepared to invest in the future of the property. So it is incumbent upon the government of Bahamas to serve as a catalyst for the redevelopment of Grand Bahama. Our vision and plans for Grand Bahama concern not only the redevelopment of Grand Bahama, and there remain other tremendous prospects for Grand Bahama that will provide hope and opportunity for Bahamians from across our archipelago. I see a day coming, Mr. Speaker, when Bahamians from Nassau and from throughout the Family Islands will go to Grand Bahama because the jobs and business opportunities of a booming economy on that island. When that day comes, we will remember what we did this very day to begin the renewal of Grand Bahama. With the decision to purchase the Grand Lucaya and to prepare for its resale, this government is demonstrating that it is prepared to act. The time for talk is over. The FNM government, Mr. Speaker, is acting to restore and redevelop Freeport and Grand Bahama. I support the resolution with great hope for the future and with firm resolve. I thank all of those, including the many public servants and private citizens who have been involved in this process. We are doing the right thing. May God bless the people of Grand Bahama. And Mr. Speaker, may God continue to bless the Bahamas.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Freetown.
Mr. Speaker, that's a very difficult act to follow. I think the member of Kalani summarized wonderfully why the government of the Bahamas is seeking to buy the Grand Lucaya. And it is now for me to second this motion. And so let's look at the very recent history of Grand Bahama's tourism performance. Oh, sorry, no, I'm starting the wrong page. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has just proposed a motion for the government of the Bahamas to guarantee a loan of $35 million from Hutchison Whampoa to complete the purchase of the Grand Lucaya Resort in Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, I resoundingly second that motion. I second it from a place of personal conviction. Before I elaborate on the compelling reasons why the government, as a matter of national interest, must purchase this hotel property, please allow me, Mr. Speaker, a couple of minutes to speak to the context that brought the government of the Bahamas to this decision.
Well, you can bring this thing along.
Mr. Speaker, most of us are familiar with the details of the narrative of Grand Bahama's economy. The narrative of Grand Bahama is one of diversity. It has enjoyed a stable and expanding industrial sector. However, the tourism economy is one of rise and fall. Let's go back 18 years to 2002. Grand Bahama was holding its own, and the tourism economy was doing well. The island boasted an inventory of 4,000 hotel rooms. The International Bazaar was a dynamic shopping destination. The island counted among its popular hotel brands the Princess, the Radisson, the Sheraton, the Westin, the Holiday Inn, the Best Western. Grand Bahama had an exciting annual calendar featuring events like the Greta Weiss 5K, the Superstars Celebrity Challenge hosted by the Princess, the powerboat races, the air shows, score of fishing tournaments, 2 PGA golf courses out of 5. Unfortunately, Grand Bahama was hit by a series of hurricanes and then by the Great Recession. For a brief period in 2014, the introduction of Sunwing from Canada and Vacation Express from the United States improved visitor arrivals to Grand Bahama. Memories Grand Bahama came on stream and enjoyed a short-lived period of success. Mr. Speaker, 2015 was a glimpse of the potential for Grand Bahama. It is also proof that with the right development, the Grand Lucayan can be a success and change the direction of visitor arrivals. Simply put, the redevelopment of Grand Lucayan will bring additional airlift. Additional airlift will improve the economy, which will bring relief to Grand Bahama. Then came Hurricane Matthew of 2016, leaving destruction in its wake and the closure of prime Grand Bahama properties, the Memories, Breakers Key, and other parts of the Grand Lucayan. From 4,000 rooms in 2002, I'm advised that the island today has an inventory of just 1,678 rooms. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about a 58% decline in the physical inventory of hotel rooms on Grand Bahama. We need significantly more hotel rooms on the island. Grand Bahama needs this government's intervention, and we will not fail Grand Bahama. Let's look at the very recent history of Grand Bahama's tourism performance. The last 3 years. In 2015, the overall visitor arrivals, both air and sea, reached a high of 964,308, almost 1 million visitors. 2 years later, in 2017, those numbers had declined to 614,570, a steep drop-off of almost 350,000 visitors, or a staggering 36.3% decline. If one were to look at just air arrivals, in 2015, the island of Grand Bahama enjoyed air arrivals of almost 160,000. By 2017, that number had dropped precipitously to just 70,692, a decline by more than half, or for those of us that are mathematically inclined, a drop of a whopping 126% in 2 short years. Mr. Speaker, I think we can all agree that this significant decline can be, without a shadow of doubt, attributed to the partial closure of the signature tourism product on the island and the drastic decrease in hotel rooms. Mr. Speaker, we simply cannot remain on the sideline. Today, the government is taking concrete steps to address this problem. Today, the government steps in and brings relief. For the first 6 months of 2018, air arrivals were consistent with 2017. But there was thankfully a 26,000 or 7% improvement in cruise/ferry passengers, mostly due to the introduction of new and now daily ferry services from South Florida and the introduction by the Ministry of Tourism of new incentives which now pay the ferry operators based upon the number of passengers that they bring, and rewards them even more if those passengers choose to stop over and spend the night in Freeport. Specifically, this F&M government, in an effort to bring... Specifically, this F&M government, in an effort to bring more stopover passengers to Grand Bahama, negotiated the return of the Grand Celebration, and in addition, negotiated the introduction of a second ship, the Grand Classica, bringing daily ferry service to Freeport from South Florida. We have seen significant improvement in the total number of passengers coming to Freeport, and we have now focused our incentives in getting more of those passengers to get off the ship and spend a couple of nights in Freeport, with the full knowledge that with daily service they can stay as long as they want and return whenever they are ready. Mr. Speaker, I recently had the opportunity to visit Grand Bahama, to perform an extensive tour of several of Grand Bahama's tourist offerings. and I was able to personally experience and observe a heartening and most encouraging development. I saw Grand Bahamians stirring with an entrepreneurial spirit. A consortium of entrepreneurs, 100% Bahamian, led by the indomitable and tireless former Member of Parliament, Mr. David Wallace, have brought on stream Pirates Cove Water Park and Zipline, an exciting place of fun and entertainment for the whole family. Mr. Speaker, his business is thriving as it caters to the cruise/ferry passengers. And what is so amazing is that within this attraction, there are a number of thriving micro businesses, all Bahamian owned and operating, all selling goods and services for their own account, but all contributing to make the park a fun, exciting day excursion. The Darvels at Crystal Beach on Boodle Bay is also offering to cruise/ferry passengers day activities and excursions, including their very own version of Swimming with the Pigs adventure. The Candle Factory has expanded its line of souvenir products to include baking and retailing of rum cakes, some of which it exports to Nassau. Blue Green Outdoors, an eco-tourism operator, offers a suite of adventures including kayaking, nature trail and birding in East Grand Bahama. Coconut Cruises offers an electric bike tour in Lucaya. Mr. Speaker, I cite these fine examples of entrepreneurial ventures to underscore the resourcefulness of individual Grand Bahamians. If such entrepreneurial energy is in evidence under the current economic circumstances, can you imagine what headway Grand Bahamians will make if their economy is revived and put back on track? On my visit, I took the time to visit the resorts and met with tourism stakeholders. I am encouraged. I also visited the new development in the West End, took an extensive tour, and see enormous promise in this project. Mr. Speaker, this government is committed to the rescue of the economy of Grand Bahama. I caution that we, who have been elected to serve the people of Grand Bahama, and those in opposition, we must collectively set aside the games of politics and rise above that in the interest of the welfare of the people of Grand Bahama. The people of Grand Bahama are proud, hard-working, resourceful, goal-orientated Bahamians. Past failures on the part of successive governments is no excuse for this elected administration to fold its arms and let Grand Bahama continue to slide into economic ruin. I reiterate, hotel room inventory over the past 16 years has dropped from 4,000 to 1,678. And in just 2 short years, stopover visitors have dropped by more than half, and total visitor arrivals have declined by a whopping 350,000. Mr. Speaker, with those numbers, if there was ever a call to arms, a need to act and not sit back, as some are suggesting, that time is now. Mr. Speaker, let's look at some of the specifics of the assets of the purchase we propose to secure. The total purchase price of the hotel is $65 million. $10 million deposit has been paid, and $20 million will be done on the date of transfer, or has already been paid. The property will be transferred to a special purpose vehicle to be known as Lucaya Renewing Holdings Limited, which will be 100% owned by the government of the Bahamas through the Hotel Corporation of the Bahamas. The SPV will be governed by an extremely and hard-working board of directors, as you heard, under the chairmanship of Mr. Michael Stott, who the directors have a wealth of experience in many disciplines, but specifically doing business in Freeport and in doing business in the hospitality industry. The government will guarantee the $35 million loan of the SPV, although the loan will be secured by a mortgage on the property. Hutchison Whampoa, the vendor, will be issued with 7 government-guaranteed bonds, each with a value of $5 million. Each bond of $5 million will mature in 6 consecutive month periods, with the first bond maturing in March 2019. The interest rate is fixed at 4%, with interest-bearing payable quarterly. The employees will be transferred to the SPV owned by the government, together with all liabilities for employment and all benefits entitled to them by virtue of their contract of employment or Bahamian legislation. Assets to be purchased: 1,271 rooms, pools, restaurants, meeting rooms, a 24,000 square foot casino, a 25,000 square foot spa. Mr. Speaker, the news of the government's proposal to purchase the Grand Lucayan has sparked vibrant public debate. Many of the questions and arguments raised against the purchase of the property would, under normal circumstances, have some merit. I would like to highlight and respond to 2 of the chief arguments put forward against the purchase of the Grand Lucayan Resort. Argument number 1. Historically, governments have a poor reputation of managing hotels. Why should this government take on such a venture when the failure rate of government's past involvement in hotel management has been so high? As a veteran businessman, my personal belief is that governments should leave all businesses, such as hotels, to be run by the private sector. Governments have a poor track record of running companies, not only in the Bahamas, but in most countries of the world. However, there comes a time when a particular situation in the country is so critical that the government must intervene in the national interest. I reiterate the national interest. The Grand Lucayan is a case in point. This is not just about a hotel and its employees, nor is it just about an island. This is about the prosperity of an entire nation. It would be an act of sheer cruelty and neglect towards the people of Grand Bahama for the government to idly stand by and let the Grand Lucayan, a prime hotel property, it would be an act of sheer cruelty and neglect towards the people of Grand Bahama for the government.
Honorable member, just a moment. It's okay for our members to clap, but not in the gallery. I can understand your enthusiasm from Grand Bahama. Okay, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
I appreciate the applause, but please be guided by the speaker. It would be an act of sheer cruelty and neglect toward the people of Grand Bahama for the government to idly stand by and let the Grand Lucayan, a prime hotel property, go the way of the Royal Oasis. Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a quick reference to the Royal Oasis comparison. The Royal Oasis closed its doors sometime in 2004. It remains closed today. The International Bazaar, which adjoins the hotel, is now a ghost town, full of derelict and abandoned buildings. Its state of near total disrepair is proving that once you make the fatal mistake of allowing a hotel to close, it is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get it reopened. The PLP government at the time failed to act and decided that it was not in Grand Bahama's best interest to intervene and stop the resort from closing. The successive F&M government, upon assuming office, was obliged to pay the severance pay for the employees, and the F&M government, was chastised by Mr. Fred Mitchell, the then opposition PLP MP for Fox Hill, to do more, and was quoted in the Nassau Guardian of the 16th of August 2018 as saying that back in 2008, and I quote, the F&M government ought to consider taking special measures to ensure that the Oasis property in Freeport is opened, including buying and developing it if necessary, to put people back to work. The F&M government. Who said this? Okay. The then opposition / PLP MP for Fox Hill was quoted, the current chairman of the Progressive Liberal Party, was quoted that the F&M government ought to consider taking special measures to ensure that the Oasis property in Freeport is opened, including buying and developing it if necessary, to put people back to work. Mr. Speaker, we have learned the lessons from previous governments. What damage inaction can cause. We heed Mr. Mitchell's advice then, and we encourage the naysayers to heed it now.
Honorable.
Inaction and closure is simply not an option for the Grand Lucayan. If the intention is to bring it back to life and to create the greatest economic impact.
Honorable members.
When it comes to securing when it comes to securing the survival of the economy of Grand Bahama, and by extension the livelihood of the people of Grand Bahama, the government will not be timid in making a decision deemed unpopular in many quarters. The government will act decisively in the best interest of the people of Grand Bahama and the people of the Bahamas. The numbers reveal a tourism sector that has received some traumatic body blows, and we were elected in overwhelming numbers to do what is necessary to reverse the trend. Mr. Speaker, I want to make it clear that the intention of the government is not to hold on to the Grand Lucayan for an extended period of time. We will purchase it and ready it for onward sale to the most attractive investor who will hopefully breathe new life into that project and bring about its rebirth. Argument number 2. If Hutchinson Whampoa, after several attempts, failed to secure a buyer for the Grand Lucayan, what makes the government feel so sure that they can succeed in closing a sale for the property? Mr. Speaker, it is a question of motivation, allegiance, and duty. Hutchinson Whampoa is a highly successful business entity, understandably motivated by its own self-interest, which is the case of all private sector businesses. The motivation of the government of the Bahamas extends beyond sole immediate profit. When it comes to a matter that will significantly impact a substantial segment of its population, in the case of Grand Bahama, over 50,000 people, the government is duty-bound to take action that is in the best interest of its citizens. In pursuing the purchase of the 1,200-room hotel property, the government seeks to secure the foundation of Grand Bahama's tourism sector and bring about a critical turn in the direction of Grand Bahama's economy. If the government did not act, the closure of the hotel was a certainty. The Grand Lucayan is too important to Freeport and ultimately the Bahamas. It is too important and too big to fail.
Go big, go big, go big.
Failure to purchase this hotel would concretize significant losses to the public treasury, a loss of annual departure tax, VAT, customs duty, all in millions of dollars if the Grand Lucayan is closed. If the resort is opened and becomes operational at effective levels, it will secure the employment of approximately 1,200 people, the wages from whom would amount to approximately 20 to 25 million, not including indirect and induced employment. The construction could see a potential of 500 jobs with annual wages of approximately $15 million. Mr. Speaker, all of this represents a significant injection into the economy of Grand Bahama. The hotel is vital to the economy of Grand Bahama and would have a devastating effect if it were to close. Specifically, it would have a severe effect on the Port Lucayan marketplace and marina, where the Prime Minister stated over 50 businesses are in operation. It would have a severe impact on the 3 daily ferry services from Florida, namely the Balearia, the Grand Celebration, and the Grand Classica. It would have a severe impact on straw vendors and taxi drivers and all other ancillary businesses and suppliers that need this hotel to be open in order for them to survive. The purchase of the Grand Lucayan and its eventual redevelopment could be the catalyst to Grand Bahama's rebirth, a chance to improve the mood and confidence levels and provide a new destination unique from other islands and really allow for the proper rebranding of Grand Bahama. We must take control of our future and our destiny. The purchase of this property is also an opportunity for more Bahamian participation and Bahamian ownership in our critical hotel industry. Behind any major decision, there must be a vision. What is the vision for Grand Bahama? Like the proverbial phoenix that rises from the ashes, we envision the gradual and sure recovery of the island of Grand Bahama. Recovery for Grand Bahama is a matter of course because the Ministry of Tourism, in collaboration with major industry stakeholders, has laid out a sound plan for economic expansion for the island. Mr. Speaker, the member for Killarney who spoke before me was clear in laying out that plan. I will emphasize a number of points raised by the member for Killarney. A well laid out plan, effectively executed, will leverage Grand Bahama's proximity to the Bahamas' major tourist market of North America. That is the United States and Canada, where almost 90% of our foreign visitors hail from. Grand Bahama's awe-inspiring natural assets, its outback forests, its mangrove, its extensive cave systems, miles of secluded beaches and surrounding seas teeming with trophy fish, and an underwater wonderland will easily allow us to entrench the island as an eco-tourism paradise and haven for fishing, diving, and birding. We are positioning Grand Bahama as a multi-destination vacation paradise catering to all tastes. Cosmopolitan beach vacation experience in Freeport, Lucaya, with 2 dynamic centers of interest offering cultural and eco-tourism and the laid-back out-island ambiance in West and East End. On the drawing board are plans to make of Grand Bahama a mecca for world-class sporting events from road races, cycling, kayaking, sailing, golfing, tennis, and sports retreats. Grand Bahama is already well known for its signature cultural events, which attract an international following. The Ministry of Tourism will continue to work with stakeholders to enhance these events to make them even more attractive for export. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister described the Ministry of Tourism's overall marketing strategy, which has been hugely successful in creating increased destination desire in the international marketplace. People want to come to the Bahamas. They are coming in increasing numbers, to the tune of a 15% increase in air arrivals within the first 6 months for the entire country. Airlift to our destination is expanding. All of this positive tourist activity will most certainly impact Grand Bahama. The Ministry of Tourism provides substantial marketing support to Grand Bahama by creating exposure for this destination across all mediums in its major markets: the USA, Canada, Latin America, the UK, in traditional media of television, radio, print, as well as digital media. It is worth repeating that the marketing strategy of the Ministry of Tourism includes engaging media and travel influencers with followings in the millions to visit Grand Bahama on familiarization trips and to convey stories of the island. Rich tourism and cultural offerings to travel consumers. The Ministry will continue to partner with successful business brands to give heightened exposure to Grand Bahama. My Ministry will provide complete marketing support for the Grand Lucaya to create a high level of visibility for the resort in our major markets. There has been much discussion about appropriate level of airlift to Grand Bahama. American Airlines has in fact already committed to a second flight from Miami to Freeport in the winter of 2018-2019. Other airline partners have indicated their willingness to work with the Bahamas in bringing additional air seats to the destination once hotel rooms are open and demand picks up. The flow of visitors to Grand Bahama is further augmented by non-stop scheduled charter flights from Milan, Italy. Mr. Speaker, Bahamas Air will also play a vital role in bringing more airlift to the Grand Lucaya. I've requested the Bahamas Air work together with the Grand Lucaya to immediately create attractive packages to that property. Mr. Speaker, a sustainable growth of the national economy of the Bahamas depends on the economic recovery of Grand Bahama. As a government, we are singularly committed to the expansion of our economy to ensure an equitable livelihood for all Bahamians. This commitment embraces the people of Grand Bahama. To the people of Grand Bahama, we, the government of the Bahamas, pledge our resolve to be relentless in our efforts to restore your island to levels of economic prosperity that will allow you to earn a living that will more than adequately sustain you and your families. Mr. Speaker, it is for these reasons elaborated that I resoundingly second the motion to secure the $35 million loan from Hutchison Whampoa to secure the purchase of Grand Lucaya Resort in Grand Bahama. Thank you and good afternoon.
As many? The chair recognizes the honourable member for Cat Island, Rum in San Salvador.
Thank you, sir. This is not about. This debate is no longer about the acquisition of the hotel. It's been done. I don't. No, nor is it about the PLP. Sorry. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, first of all, I'd like to point out that having received the agreement of sale yesterday morning and noting what has been put out in the press, we are safe to say that the transaction has been completed. So this is not about whether they should purchase the hotel or not purchase it. It's already been done. What we're discussing here, so what we would be hoping to show is that perhaps, as he has drawn an illustration of what Obama did, and attempting to show that that is what he is doing, I think he didn't quite understand what Obama is doing, or he doesn't understand what he has done. And that is, Mr. Speaker, that what Obama did, he provided a bailout. He did not take over the auto industry. He provided a bailout. And yes, and the government here could have provided a bailout as well, which we would have supported. We don't have an issue with it. We would have supported a bailout, right? But in this instance, Mr. Speaker, this is not a bailout, but a takeover. They've done a takeover, and so when you did that, Speaker, that's what you did.
Honorable members.
You said, if you want to take the Bahamian money and give it to a foreign investor, well, that's what you've done. That's what you've done, right? So, and you did more than just give them monies for equity. You did more than that. So, Mr. Speaker, we would just maybe you should, right? Just listen, maybe. And I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for recognizing. So, the city of Freeport is Grand Bahamas' key commercial, industrial, district, communication, transportation, and financial hub. Not to mention a major population center. And as a result, this island's economy contributes significantly to the overall economy of the Bahamas. And I must say, a district at Freeport is dear to me. Yes.
5 years.
They're very dear to me. I lived in Grand Bahama.
Nothing happened in 5 years.
I lived in Grand Bahama. They keep saying nothing happened in 5 years. I was able to demonstrate what happened.
My Lord.
Right, Mr. Speaker.
Tell the people
In 1974.
Honorable members.
It's 1974, Speaker. I moved there as a young lawyer, young practitioner, and formed enduring business and personal relationships in Grand Bahama. In those days, Grand Bahama seemed to be on the cusp of success. I was there. The cusp of success, was celebrated even in song. Eric Flint's his declaration, when you can't find your friends in Nassau, they're in Freeport, or they're in jail. So, Mr. Speaker, so Grand Bahama represents the burgeoning potential of the Bahamas generally, but its potential has always been compromised or undermined by bad deals after bad deals. That's what has happened. But I wish us today to commit for Grand Bahama. Commit to no more bad deals. That is what has undermined. That is what has undermined and compromised its success. Mr. Speaker, too often, we tend to diminish our essence here. There are many beautiful and diverse islands, many beautiful and diverse peoples. We're all one nation, as we keep speaking to the Prime Minister. One people. So when Grand Bahama hurts, we all hurt. We all hurt. Not just you. We all hurt. While hope and rebounding prosperity lie ahead for Grand Bahama, it requires policymakers to be cognizant of the real and present struggles and continual challenges of our people. We here in this place must understand that more particularly. We must take conscientious decisions that will include tangible turnarounds for each island. In this case, we're talking about Grand Bahama. And in Grand Bahama, I'm talking about the whole of Grand Bahama. See, when we assumed office in May 2012, the economy of Grand Bahama was depressed, with high unemployment and severe economic hardship. 2012. Tourism was in severe decline, with low stopover arrivals and hotel occupancies. A number of hotels had closed and there was inadequate and continues to be inadequate airlift. In 2016, therefore, Mr. Speaker, therefore, in 2016, with the expiration of the Hawksbill Agreement, we took the fundamental decision to revise relevant concessions based on the bipartisan considerations and recommendations of a 6-member review committee. That committee was led by Dr. Marcus Bethel and Maurice Moore, right? With 7 other members. The intent of our efforts was to cause that the Grand Bahamas return to its glory days through generous and special tax concessions under the Hawksbill Creek Agreement and other enabling legislation, with monitoring mechanisms and a right to claw back these special concessions. Our focus was to return the magic back to that community. The realistic, holistic approach of the review committee evolved an evidence-based plan of action following wide consultation with relevant stakeholders. The plan addresses the measures which we must take or must be taken to ensure both the short and long-term sustainability of the Grand Bahama economy, and particularly Freeport. We left in place and laid on the table of the House the comprehensive report, complete with recommendations on the way forward. Mr. Prime Minister, we had a plan, an evidence-based plan. It was laid on the House here. Right? We also left in place a memorandum of understanding between the government, the Grand Bahama Port Authority, certain Hutchison Whampoa-owned companies with vital interests in hotels, properties, harbor, shipping, and the airport, etc. That was left in place. See, sadly, after some 16 months in office, we see very little, if anything, which the F&M administration is doing to implement any of these comprehensive measures, which we say and we believe are essential to Grand Bahamas' economic revival, survival, and to offer relief from the hardships being endured by far too many Grand Bahamians. We left in place, for example, Mr. Speaker, a cruise port development for East Grand Bahama for $200 million started for Carnival Cruise. What has happened to that? And we had no plans. These measures, Mr. Speaker, of change included strategies for the reorganization and recapitalization of the Grand Bahama Port Authority, such that it would meet its developmental and civic obligations while facilitating the easier environment for doing business in Freeport, extending some of the same duty-free concessions to start-up and existing businesses located east and west of the city of Freeport, that businesses within the port have enjoyed. They have extended the concessions to East and West Grand Bahama. Freeport enjoyed it for years, right? And that was the policy tax change necessary, we say, to turn around the economy of all of Grand Bahama. Now, Mr. Speaker, there's a sage saying that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. And Mr. Speaker, if you go and look at the history of what has happened to Grand Bahama after each of, from 1955, they had a 30-year concession. When that expired, they got an extension, and all that was given was buildings, etc. Had nothing to do with the structural changes that impacted, right? In 1993, another 20-year extension, right? And we did the same thing again. So we thought doing the same thing hasn't helped. Grand Bahama. That's why we engage the
Honorable Member, are you on a point of order?
Stop the clock.
Mr. Speaker, the member...
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama.
The member speaks about the Freeport Act, I think it's 1993, if I remember correctly. And he made the statement that Grand Bahama got nothing out of that extension. I just want, he said something about some buildings, that there were some buildings built. Mr. Speaker, I just want to make sure the record it reflects that as a result of that exercise, 2 high schools were built in Grand Bahama. The Grand Bahama shipyard came as a result of that extension. And so for the member to say that nothing happened as a result of that extension is absolutely misleading, Mr. Speaker. So I just want to correct the record.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I'm responding, so don't put this on my time. I allowed you, so I would not wish to speak on my time. Mr. Speaker, I never said that nothing came out of the extensions. What I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, is that what came out of the extensions did not address the fundamental issues and challenges that of the community of Grand Bahama and Freeport. Otherwise, perhaps if it had been done, maybe we would not be in the situation we are today. That's all I'm saying. That's why in 2016, when the extensions, when it expired, we took a different approach to it. That's what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker. That's why I say insanity is doing the same thing over and over. I never said nothing came out of it. Yes, something came out of it. Right? In 1992, when it was done, something came out of it as well. Well, 92 or 93. So I'm not saying nothing came out of it. What I'm saying is that Freeport and Grand Bahama is the state, despite what was done then, right? Nothing happened to the fundamental issues of fundamental government. That's what I'm saying. So, Mr. Speaker, right? And so what came out of our 2016 review, which was evidence-based, right, and supported by a complete report by McKinsey's report, which is also laid on the table. I say this to draw your attention to it, right? We passed the Freeport, the Grand Bahama Port Area Investment Incentive Act, right? Which effectively changed the paradigm shift of the status quo in Grand Bahama as to how it's going to do business. Now, this government proposes to reverse that by repealing that act. I'll show us evidence. No, but y'all derail this. It's derailed. I could go through it, but I will not be. It was not effective, Mr. Speaker. There simply has to be a change in strategy, Mr. Speaker. If we as policymakers are serious about making a change in the Grand Bahama, in the economy of Grand Bahama. The multilateral undertakings on the part of the Port Authority, the government, major stakeholders and civil society, including the local Chamber of Commerce, would have rigorously promoted and expanded the economy of Grand Bahama. In spite of the long-standing broad and generous concessions that apply to the port area, Freeport's economy has been stagnant for an extended period of time, with government expenditure consistently exceeding revenues in that area. And I said I had a question for the Prime Minister, and the question was, I wonder if the Prime Minister is aware of these business realities. And it seemed to me that he was unaware of it. That's why I draw his attention. Let's go to the Oxbow Creek Review Committee. It's laid on the board. It was a bipartisan approach. It was evidence-based. It's here. I draw your attention to it so you could use it. Right? And this formed the basis. This formed the basis of the Grand Bahama Port Investment Act that we passed in 2016, which was supported again by experts in tax related matters. And both documents are laid on the table. And I suspect we were not aware of it because we were not aware we had no plan. Otherwise, we could say we had a plan and we were included it, maybe. Right? So, Mr. Speaker, it was important for me to provide that overview. Right? Because having acquired these properties, I would have thought, and we will recognize, that all we have to first, in my view, address all of the other associated issues impacting Grand Bahama and Freeport specifically. The fundamentals of its economy and its tourism product in particular. Otherwise, the acquisition is a recipe for failure. Otherwise, if you don't address all these other associated, yes, it could help the vendor, the taxi drivers. But buying a hotel without a strategy of having heads in beds, what will be the consequence of that? Mr. Speaker, given the sound bipartisan advice of the committee, it is the considered view of this side that the acquisition of these properties is a desperate, ill-advised, and inadequate band-aid approach to addressing the critical condition of the economy of Grand Bahama. Simply put, it is a bad deal. I can tell you, you'll hear. In our view, it is another bad deal like the ill-advised and scandalous Oban affair. That's why I call upon us to commit here today. No more bad deals for Grand Bahama. You know, that deal is still shrouded in secrecy, compounded by the fact that the Parliament, this Parliament, was misled by no less a person than the Prime Minister. And Mr. Speaker, that scandalous Oban deal is a matter on which this government is yet to come clean to the payment people. And here again, this deal is being clouded in secrecy. And we demand that the side opposite comes clean on this deal to the payment people. I'll tell you. You know, Speaker, it was last week. You know, Speaker, last week they called us to debate this yesterday, and I understand that government needs. We were calling on you, just all of our contributors, to do something with Grand Bahama. We keep telling you need to put some money on the ground in Grand Bahama. We keep telling you that, right? We kept telling you to do that, right? So,
honorable members.
Speaker,
they gave it to
Speaker, I call on the Prime Minister to provide, having purchased the property, to provide the details of the normal due diligence which they carried out before concluding the agreement and buying this property. Additionally, I think it is essential to discuss whether the government considered the reason or reasons why Hutchison, with its multi-billion-dollar resources and generous concessions and subsidies that we gave them, failed to successfully and profitably operate these resort properties over the many years. I'm afraid that we are making another big mistake in failing to learn from past missteps. Hutchison has invested huge amounts of capital in this hotel property. They have offered extremely good terms of employment, including health insurance to its employees. The Grand Lucaya was kept open in the face of heavy operational losses. You know, Papa had made a good arrangement with them to make sure they stayed open.
I better listen to Papa.
Right? You all better listen to Papa. Hudson Wampa, even when they were... You'll hear. Listen, you'll hear. You'll hear. You just stay tuned, you listen. Stay tuned and listen. Hudson Wampa, even when they were under internationally branded management, with all of their marketing clout, and vast client base has not operated this property successfully. All of this causes me to wonder, with all these available facts and outstanding questions, why the PM himself has, go to Hong Kong and speak to the principals face to face, man. Let us accept that the government has no expertise or track record of success in the hotel industry. Further, and by its own admission, the government is also struggling. This is what they say now. They are struggling to make certain payments. And in many instances, they're ignoring contractors, lunch vendors, and school bus drivers, nurses, doctors, in addition to severing staff in the interest of fiscal austerity. You're doing all of these things, you can't pay these bills, but you can find $65 million. Speaking of health professionals, Mr. Speaker, nurses and doctors are at their wits' end and they're striking because they need some money. Now, Mr. Speaker, there are claims of poor working conditions in the public health facilities, no air conditioning, no operating theaters. The ceilings are reportedly collapsing and promised confirmations to connected payments not materializing. The Speaker, I can look at them. I can look at them. Yeah. No, I never say close the hotel. I have an answer for you. I'll answer. The Speaker. Another thing, I'm reliably informed, for example, Mr. Speaker. Reliably informed, Mr. Speaker,
honorable members,
that there are medical students in Barbados right now having to
honorable members,
cancel.
Honorable members,
Continued by this government.
The member for Cal Island has the floor.
Right. So, Mr. Speaker. These are all of the other issues. See, we are one Bahamas, and I agree with that. And so we need to look at the whole Bahamas. I'm just drawing this to the attention of the government to consider, right? This is an administration that has drastically slashed social benefits, right? A government who has struggled to provide beds, and ventilators for babies in the hospital has taken on, right? And at least that they could find $65 million to pay for this hotel. They have done that, right? Now, Mr. Speaker, is what we have to ask ourselves, and this is the question that I think the employees have to ask themselves, is the entity used by the government to acquire these properties sufficiently staffed to take on the required management, and will it be sufficiently resourced? Right? Mr. Parker, in determining, Mr. Speaker, the realistic purchase price and interest, it should be noted that for a long time, this property was listed,
honorable members.
This property is listed for a long time with the international brokers, and without success, it has been sold. Right? Most of the potential purchasers, right, have the same questions I've been posing here. Right? First of all, they were not willing to meet the demanded price, and they were expressing concerns with the touristic plan and infrastructure Grand Bahama. They would expect those things to be fixed. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the seller, having collected a substantial hurricane insurance and loss of income claim, apart from the minimal repairs to the lighthouse, opted to retain the balance and not repair and reopen the hotel. So what is happening with that? Right? It is, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, against this foregoing background that I must call into question the purchase price of $65 million. Now, on top of the $65 million, right, I call for the Prime Minister to provide and lay on the table of this Honorable House all of the other additional costs and liabilities, right, inclusive the staff benefits, because we want to make sure they are properly taken care of. any severance payments, closing costs, insurance. Now, I can give you the object. The hotel has been bought. I start off by saying the hotel has been bought, man. This is not about whether you should buy it or not. You've already bought it. So I just want y'all to put these things on the table. I don't want y'all to shortchange the staff. I don't want y'all to change up the stuff. Right? And so, Mr. Speaker, we also want, Mr. Speaker,
honorable members.
Speaker, I want
the members on a point of order. Honorable member for Cat Island, the member for Yamacross on a point of order. State your point. Honorable member.
Misleading the House. This is the process to authorize the payment for the purchase. We don't say it's already been bought. We can't do it without this, and the honorable member knows very well. So he can participate in this process if he's saying now that he's not saying that it should not be bought.
Speaker.
Yes, that's what he can do.
I will not. I don't want to get into that because we have already paid $30 million. That's gone. The $30 million has gone. You've paid it. Right? And the deal has been done. You're in possession. You're in possession of property. Speaker, they are in the possession of property. Right? So, Mr. Speaker, I would also wish the government, right?
Honorable members.
Operating losses for at least the next 12 months. Now, herein lies, Mr. Speaker, herein lies perhaps the alternative, right? Herein lies perhaps the alternative to spending $55 million at this time. Herein lies the politics, Mr. Speaker, because I'll be remiss not to point out that the proposed guarantee that was attached to the resolution that was provided to me, it reveals that Hutchison coveted to keep the lighthouse open once the government paid a subsidy to cover the operational costs. Now, Mr. Speaker, I find it quite remarkable that the dollar value of the hotel's operating losses was somehow predetermined at the time of the execution of the sales agreement. I also find it remarkable that an undisclosed amount was paid at the time, leaving a balance of approximately $1 million to be paid in 7 installments. I now know what that undisclosed amount is. It's $1 million. That was disclosed to me yesterday. What is equally remarkable, Mr. Speaker, is that losses of more than $1 million were for an unspecified period. The agreement was signed on the 15th of August, and the sale completed on the 12th of September when the government took it over. Right? In reviewing the agreement of sale last night, I discovered that the loss period was defined from the 1st of August, at least 2 weeks before you signed the agreement, to complete to the period of the 12th of September. So it's about a $50,000 a day loss that was predetermined and agreed to be paid for by the government. Now, perhaps the Speaker, they will speak to this. It was the state's objective, the government, save jobs in the immediate term, with the eventual sale of the property and to facilitate the rebound of Grand Bahamas. Then why would the government not just fund the operating loss with subsidy for a period of at least 6 months within which public pronouncements suggest that the property would be sold? That's what I would have thought. That might have been the more prudent approach. You'll be saving the jobs. You're saving your jobs, right? So, Mr. Speaker, having covenanted to pay the operating losses, perhaps it may have been a more prudent approach to continue paying the operating losses, keeping the hotel open. No, it can't be. No, Mr. Speaker, you're going to sell the property. They said they would be able to sell the property. In fact, Mr. Speaker, No, Mr. Speaker, it is a public pronouncements by the chairman of the entity. We are advised, he advised the public, he advised Mr. Scott, who's present, advised the public that he had a number of proposals that he was then reviewing, and that he expected that within about 6 months there'll be an imminent sale. So taking that into account, right, that would have been, it would have cost you, right, what, $9 million for 6 months instead of spending $65 million. That's what I'm saying. It would have been, that's the alternative I would have recommended to you, Mr. Speaker. Now, and so, Mr. Speaker, we say, Mr. Speaker, the sale has been done. The sale has been done.
Just say yes. Just say yes.
On a point of order, the chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Yamakro.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. When we first started this morning, the Honourable Member for St. Cat Island, Rum Kingston, Salvador, got his feet and quoted a section from the not the Constitution. He quoted from the Financial Administration and Audit Act. Said, yes, in 18, as to whether or not this process can be had for the purpose of purchasing, whether the government can do that. He knows very well, right, that there must be, in order to get the property, there must be a contemporary or a movement of the funds to the for the property.
We don't need that.
No, you have a lawyer.
We don't need that.
You have a lawyer.
Honourable members.
I haven't finished my point. He knows very well that in order to get the property, the real estate, there has to be funding, and that's what he was questioning. The process has not yet been completed for the purchase of this property, and he knows that. And he knows as a seasoned member of this House what is the purpose of the resolution. He tried to prevent it. And a senior member of the bar, he stood up this morning, he tried to prevent it. All I'm suggesting, as the Minister of Tourism said, as Mr. Fred Mitchell indicated, we should purchase this hotel. He knows that, and he should support it.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Cat Island.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I mean, I see why the Prime Minister refers to Carmichael as his lawyer. So I must talk to his lawyer, right? I'll prefer to talk to his lawyer, because it never represented that. Well, I asked the question to which the Prime Minister's lawyer responded to, which I responded to. So, Mr. Speaker, see, and he obviously did not even read the agreement of sale, because if he looks at 3.3, clause 3.3 of the agreement, it tells you what closure means, right? So, Mr. Speaker,
He knows that. Right.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I just want it to be known, right? We do care. We do care, Mr. Speaker. And we understand the plight of the hotel workers. The fact is, there is an alternative solution that will not imperil other badly needed services in Grand Bahama. Our strategy, Mr. Speaker, in refurbishing the former reef property and us opening memories, the PLP did, he asked what we did. With Sunwing out of Canada, provide tangible evidence that we care. This experience is not uncharted. This experience is not uncharted territory for us. And we have been there and we have done that. Mr. Speaker,
30 more seconds.
this exercise cannot be just a PR exercise driven by just desperation. Grand Bahama just does not need another bad deal, and that's what it is. Right? Mr. Speaker, it is imperative. I've given you all the alternative. But I just tell you what I'll do, right? It's a bad deal. It's a bad deal, right? It's imperative, Mr. Speaker, that the government fully discloses how much this deal is costing the Bahamian people. For example, I note from the agreement that the inventory on the property is not included in the sales price. Do we know how much that is? Could you tell us what that is? We don't know. I don't know. Huh? Huh? We don't know. Huh? Right, so Mr. Speaker, the inventories are not included, right? We like to know what that is. I will also ask the government to provide us a business plan to support the massive, this is a massive financial undertaking.
Honorable members, the chair is extending a discretion to the honorable member.
Obliged.
You have 2 minutes to complete, honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, it is essential to know how the government arrived at the purchase price. It's essential for us to know what this is costing us all. Right? Was this based on a current market value, together with the current quantity surveyors report on the estimate costs for the hurricane damage for the repairs, recognizing that Hutchison One Power has already collected the insurance claim for these damages? In negotiating the purchase price, was this taken into account? Did we take into account all of the concessions we have given them over the years, man? Right? Hutchison is smiling to the bank. I just would wish to know who was negotiating on our part, man. That's why, Prime Minister, you should have gone and sat with the owners and looked at them in the eyes and said, this is what you've done for me. And guess what? I'm not going to speak to it, but if you go back in the files and see what Papa did and why they built that hotel, right? Why they built that hotel, and the arrangements what they entered into, that would have armed you to give you the negotiation power to have to pay far less than this. That's what we say. That's what we say. Right? So, Mr. Speaker. Right, so Mr. Speaker. Man, I listen. It's done. That's done. Mr. Speaker. We have the tourist plan. The tourist plan has to be improved. There's a number of associated fundamental issues to address Grand Bahama for this to work. Right? You have to have a proper hotel brand, sufficient airlift, etc. I recommend to the Prime Minister and the government to take a look at the strategic approach that was taken by us, that was informed by the review of the committee, that was assessed by this, and the Speaker, and they could, but you could dust it off and call it something else, right? Right? So Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member.
You see, and they talk about.
Honorable member, if you can wrap up now.
Okay, Mr. Speaker. They talk about, the Speaker, we talk about the subventions to Grand Bahama. When we came into office in 2012, right, the FNM administration was pouring some $29 million a year in supporting the industry, including subsidies to Hutchison. We continued that. Only thing we did is we reduced that. And that strategy was working. You could have continued that as an alternative to spending the $65 million until you find a buyer, until you found a buyer. That's what we're saying. All right. So we continued what was being done by the previous administration. But what we did, we found that $29 million was too much, and we were able to reduce it. And we brought in Memories and Lighthouse. So, Mr. Speaker, we got Sunwing that brought...
For the third time.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what I say, we contend that government ownership is a bad idea, but that has been done. We say that this is a bad deal. However, we understand what their thinking is, having heard the Prime Minister. Right? I just want us to commit going forward. There'll be no more bad deals for Grand Bahama. Right? Grand Bahama needs vision from this government. It needs direction. It needs leadership. And it needs a bold focus to move ahead with a plan of action. Right? And we say that plan of action is already. Just take a look at Maurice Moore was in it. Maurice Moore was a part of it, right? So I also invite the government to share the answers. I wrote you a letter on Monday. And I invite you to respond to those. And I invite the government to share these answers to all those important questions that I've raised today and I've raised in my letter. I thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Speaker.
But he didn't say what he said. What's the secession? Yea or nay? You support the resolution?
It's a bad deal. It's a bad deal.
As many? The chair recognizes the honourable member for Central Grand Bahama. Pardon? The chair recognizes the honourable member for Central Grand Bahama. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, at this time, we will take our lunch break, so I do move that the House suspends until 3 p.m. today.
Until 3 p.m.
3 p.m.
Second. It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House do suspend until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many as are in favour will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The business of this House stands suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
I have leave. Okay.